Have you ever looked at your life and wondered how something so beautiful, something you worked so hard to build, could start to feel like it's slipping through your fingers? Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right? You're praying, you're trying to be a good person, you've been blessed with so much, and yet there's this quiet, nagging feeling that you're drifting. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The idea that we could have all the wisdom in the world, all the success we ever dreamed of, and still wake up one day realizing we've lost the very thing that made us who we are. Today, we're going to look at one of the most brilliant and tragic figures in history to answer a question that hits closer to home than we'd like to admit. How does someone who has everything, someone who literally heard the voice of God, end up losing it all? We aren't just talking about a king from thousands of years ago. We're talking about the architecture of your own soul. We're going to uncover how Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, allowed his heart to be partitioned bit by bit until there was nothing left for the divine. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how you can guard your own heart against that same slow, silent erosion. Because the truth is, nobody falls off a cliff in a single day. It's 1,000 small steps in the wrong direction that we call just a little bit of compromise. I want to invite you into something deeper than just a video. If you've ever felt the weight of trying to keep your light burning in a world that seems designed to blow it out, I want you to walk this path with us. By joining this community, you aren't just hitting a button, you're making a commitment to yourself and to a group of people who are all trying to choose the eternal over the temporary. We talk about the things that actually matter here, the quiet battles, the spiritual pivots, and the way back home when we feel lost. If you want to ensure your wisdom stays sharp and your heart stays whole, I'd love for you to join us so we can face these shadows together. Think about the beginning of Solomon's story. It's the ultimate spiritual honeymoon. He's young, he's humble, and when God asks him what he wants, anything in the world, he doesn't ask for money or the heads of his enemies. He asks for an understanding heart. That is such a beautiful phrase. He didn't just want facts, he wanted the ability to discern between good and evil. And God was so moved by that humility that he gave him everything else too. Solomon became the gold standard for success. People traveled from the ends of the earth just to hear him speak. He was the man who had it all figured out. But there's a shadow that starts to grow in the corners of the temple he built. You see, the very things that make us successful in the eyes of the world are often the very things that test our loyalty to the Spirit. Solomon's downfall wasn't a sudden explosion of rebellion. It was a slow, sophisticated, and even logical series of choices. He began to believe that he could handle a little bit of the world while still holding on to all of the heavens. He thought his wisdom was a shield that made him immune to the consequences of compromise. We all do that sometimes, don't we? We think, I know enough, I'm strong enough, I can step into the gray area and not get lost in the fog.
We'll get to the specific moment where it all changed in just a second, but first, we have to acknowledge the pain of that drift. If you're sitting there right now feeling like you're not as close to the divine as you were a year ago or even a month ago, I want you to know that you aren't alone. Even the wisest man who ever lived felt that pull. The question isn't whether you'll feel the pull. The question is what you do when the world starts asking for a piece of your heart. The tragedy of Solomon isn't just that he failed, it's that he failed while knowing better. That's the part that keeps many of us up at night, isn't it? The fear that our knowledge won't be enough to save us from our nature. Solomon had the blueprints for a holy life. He literally built the house where the presence of God resided. But he forgot that the most important temple he would ever oversee wasn't made of cedar and gold. It was the one beating inside his own chest. When we look at 1 Kings, we see a list of numbers that seem impressive at first glance. 700 wives, 300 concubines. From a worldly political standpoint, Solomon was a genius. He was building alliances. He was securing borders. He was ensuring that Israel wouldn't be at war. He likely told himself that these marriages were a small price to pay for national security. He probably looked at these women from foreign lands and thought, I can bring them into my world, but I won't let their world into mine. Have you ever said that to yourself? I can handle this environment. I can listen to this talk or hang out in this circle or entertain this habit, and it won't change who I am. We tell ourselves we're the exception to the rule. We believe our foundation is so solid that a little bit of rising water won't matter. But here is the spiritual law that Solomon overlooked, and it's a law that governs your life and mine every single day. You cannot give your heart to something or someone without eventually moving in the direction of that devotion. The scriptures tell us that as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. It didn't happen when he was a young, vibrant king on his knees at the altar. It happened in the as he grew old moments. It happened in the exhaustion. It happened in the comfort. It happened when he stopped being vigilant because he felt he had already arrived. There is a concept we often forget in our modern world, something deep and ancient. Your heart is not a bottomless well. It has a specific capacity. When you fill it with the noise of the world, with the desire to be accepted by people who do not value your light, or with the pursuit of physical pleasure that has been disconnected from its divine purpose, you are literally displacing the space where the Spirit lives. You aren't just adding to your life, you are replacing the eternal with the temporary. Solomon began to bridle his wisdom instead of his passions. He used his intellect to justify his desires. He started to build high places for the gods of his wives, altars to Chemosh and Molech, right across from the temple of the living God. Imagine that for a second. The same man who prayed the most beautiful prayer of dedication in the Bible was now supervising the construction of monuments to idols.
I know what a voice in your head might be saying right now. It's saying, I'm not building altars to false gods. I'm not Solomon. My life is small and quiet. But let's be honest with each other in the stillness of this moment. What are the high places in your life? What are the things you've built that compete with your devotion to the divine? Is it the need for validation on a screen? Is it a secret habit that you tell yourself isn't hurting anyone? Is it a relationship that requires you to dim your light just to keep the peace? The scary thing about Solomon's story is that he didn't stop believing in God, he just added other things alongside him. He tried to live a multi-faith life in a way that diluted his primary covenant. He thought he could have the best of both worlds, but the divine doesn't want a seat at the table of your life. He wants to be the one who provides the table. We often think of lust as just a physical slip-up, a moment of weakness. But for Solomon, and for us, it's deeper. Lust is the desire to take something that isn't yours to satisfy a hunger that only God can fill. It's a shortcut to intimacy. It's an attempt to feel powerful or loved without the vulnerability and discipline of a true relationship with the Spirit. When Solomon gave in to his desires, he wasn't just looking for pleasure, he was looking for an escape from the weight of his own wisdom. It's exhausting to be wise. It's exhausting to be the one everyone looks to for answers. I see you trying to hold it all together, trying to be the strong one for your family, your job, your church. Sometimes the temptation to just let go, to just give in to something that feels good for a moment is overwhelming. You feel like you've earned a break from being holy. But here is what we're going to uncover as we go deeper into this. Solomon's break turned into a broken life. The peace he tried to buy with his alliances ended up being the very thing that tore the kingdom apart after he was gone. We'll look at the specific anatomy of how he lost his grip in just a moment, and how his story actually gives us the map for our own recovery. Because even in the wreckage of a divided heart, there is a way back to being whole. This brings us to a line in the sand moment, a realization that might be uncomfortable to sit with, but it is the only truth that can set you free. You cannot negotiate with your soul. There is no middle ground when it comes to the direction of your heart. You are either moving toward the light or you are slowly, perhaps imperceptibly, being pulled into the shadows. Solomon tried to walk the line. He tried to be a man of God on the Sabbath and a man of the world the rest of the week. But the soul doesn't work in shifts. The deep theology here isn't about the number of wives or the amount of gold. It's about the concept of a divided heart. In the ancient world, the heart wasn't just the seat of emotion, it was the center of the will. When the scriptures say Solomon's heart was turned, it means his will became fragmented. He lost his integrity, and I mean that in the literal sense of the word, integer, meaning whole. He was no longer a whole person, he was a collection of competing desires. I want you to imagine your spiritual life as a reservoir. Every time you make a choice that aligns with your highest self, you're strengthening the dam. But every time you compromise, every time you say, this one thing doesn't matter, or I can handle this just this once, you're creating a hairline fracture. At first, it's just a mist, a tiny bit of dampness on the concrete. You can ignore it. You can even cover it up with more wisdom or more service, but the pressure of the world is constant, and eventually, those hairline fractures meet. Solomon's lust wasn't just about the physical, it was a lust for more influence, more comfort, more security, more stimulation. It was an appetite that grew as it was fed. This is the great lie of the world, that if we just give the natural man a little bit of what he wants, he'll be satisfied and leave us alone. But the opposite is true. Feeding a lower desire only makes it hungrier. There is a law of spiritual physics at play here. We become like what we worship. If you worship your own comfort, you will become soft and easily moved by the winds of trial. If you worship the opinions of others, you will become a shadow of whoever is standing in front of you. Solomon began to worship the gods of his wives, and he became like them, hollow, cold, and ultimately powerless to save his own legacy. I have to ask you, and I'm asking myself as much as I'm asking you, where have you started to compromise? Where have you told yourself that you are wise enough to dance on the edge of the cliff? I know the excuses because I've used them too. I'm just human. God knows my heart. It's not as bad as what other people are doing.
But God knows my heart is actually a terrifying statement if our heart is divided. He knows the part of you that is trying, yes, but he also knows the part of you that is holding back, the part of you that is keeping a high place built for an idol you aren't ready to tear down. We'll get to the practical steps of how to tear those altars down in a moment, but right now we need to address the line in the sand. This is your moment of decision. You cannot watch a video like this and stay the same. You either acknowledge the drift and start the hard work of rowing back, or you close this tab and continue to float further away. I know it's hard. I know that voice in your head is telling you that it's too late, or that you're too deep into your habits, or that your heart is already too fractured to be made whole again. But that is the voice of the adversary. The divine is the master healer. He specializes in restoring things that are broken, but he cannot heal what you refuse to give him. He will not compete with the idols in your life. He is a jealous God, not because he is insecure, but because he knows that anything else you give your heart to will eventually break it. If you're feeling that weight right now, that's not condemnation, it's an invitation. It's the Spirit tugging on the cord of your soul, reminding you of who you actually are. You aren't a victim of your desires. You are a child of the Most High, endowed with the power to choose. Solomon lost his wisdom because he forgot his source. He started to think the light was coming from him rather than through him.
We're about to pivot into how you can actually guard your heart in a world that is designed to distract it. We're going to talk about the practical daily armor you need to put on so that you don't end up like the king who had everything and realized it was all vanity and vexation of spirit. But before we do, I want you to take a breath and just admit to yourself, I have been drifting. There is so much power in that honesty. The moment you stop pretending is the moment the healing begins. So how do we actually do it? How do we stop the drift and guard our wisdom in a world that feels like it's constantly trying to siphon it away? It's one thing to recognize the tragedy of Solomon, but it's another thing entirely to wake up tomorrow morning and live differently. If you're like me, you don't want a lecture. You want a lifeline. You want to know how to keep your heart whole when everything around you is trying to pull it into a dozen different directions. The first step, and this is the foundation of everything, is what I call the daily recalibration. You see, Solomon didn't lose his way because of one big decision. He lost it because he stopped checking his compass every morning. In the quiet hours before the world starts demanding things from you, you have to build an altar in your mind. This isn't about a religious checklist or making sure you read a certain number of verses so you can feel good about yourself. This is about survival. It's about sitting in the presence of the divine and saying, I am yours before I am anything else. I am yours before I am a boss, a parent, a spouse, or a success. I've found that if I don't start my day by surrendering my will starts to think it's the king. That a self-appointed king is a dangerous thing. Every morning, you have to look at the idols that are trying to creep into your peripheral vision, the need for a certain amount of money to feel safe, the hunger for a certain person's approval, and you have to intentionally lay them down. You have to tell your soul, this is not my source, the divine is my source. If you don't do this daily, the world will slowly, quietly rewrite your priorities until you wake up one day and realize you've been building a temple for a God that doesn't even know your name. The second step is a bit more granular, and it requires some ruthless honesty. You need to audit your high places. Remember, Solomon didn't just stumble into those foreign altars. He built them. He gave them a place in his kingdom. We do the same thing. We have high places in our lives, those secret corners where we allow things that dim our light. It might be a social media feed that leaves you feeling inadequate or lustful. It might be a friendship that always seems to pull you into gossip or cynicism. It might be a habit that you tell yourself isn't a big deal, but always leaves you feeling disconnected from the spirit afterward. I want you to take a mental walk through the kingdom of your life. Where are the altars you've built that don't belong to the light? You have to be willing to tear them down. And here is the hard truth. You can't just stop building them. You have to replace them with something better. If you have a habit of looking for validation in the wrong places, you have to find a way to practice feeling seen by the divine. If you're using lust to escape stress, you have to find a healthy, holy way to process that stress. You can't just leave a hole in your heart. You have to fill it with the real thing, or the foreign gods will just move back in. The third step is something that transformed the way I look at my own desires. We often think of our passions, our hungers, our drives, our lusts as enemies that need to be killed. But that's not quite right. Your passions are actually a form of power. They are the engine of your soul. The problem isn't the power, it's the lack of a bridle. Think of a wild, powerful horse. If it's left to its own devices, it can cause a lot of damage. It can run off a cliff or trample a garden. But if you bridle that horse, you don't lose the power, you gain the ability to direct it. You can use that energy to plow a field, to travel great distances, to do something beautiful. This is what it means to bridle your passions. It's not about becoming a person who feels nothing. It's about becoming a person whose feelings are directed by their wisdom rather than the other way around. When you feel that pull towards something that isn't yours or something that is beneath you, don't just try to suppress it. Recognize it as energy that needs to be redirected. Tell yourself, I have this hunger because I was made for intimacy and connection, but I will not feed it with a counterfeit. I will save this fire for the hearth where it belongs. But what if you've already failed? What if you're listening to this and you realize you're already miles down the wrong road? What if your kingdom is already divided and you feel like you've lost your wisdom a long time ago?
I know that feeling. It's the weight of shame that tells you there's no point in trying anymore because the damage is done. But I want to tell you something that Solomon seemingly struggled to grasp in his final years. The divine is not looking for a perfect record, he is looking for a broken and contrite heart. The difference between a slip and a slide is what you do in the moment you realize you're falling. Failure isn't the end of your story unless you choose to stay in the dirt. In the spiritual life, there is no such thing as too far gone. There is only not back yet. If you've been building altars to the wrong gods, you can start tearing them down today. It starts with one honest prayer. It starts with one small choice to move back toward the light. You don't have to fix your whole life in an hour. You just have to make the next right choice. And I know, some of you are thinking, I've tried that and I just keep failing. I get it. I've been in that cycle where you feel like a hypocrite for even trying to pray. But grace isn't a backup plan for when we fail. Grace is the power that helps us stop failing. It's the enabling power that gives us the strength we don't have on our own. When you realize you can't do it by yourself, you're actually in the perfect position to finally succeed. Because that's when you stop relying on your own wisdom, which failed Solomon, and you start relying on the source of all wisdom. We're going to wrap this up in a moment with a specific challenge for your week, but I want you to sit with that for a second. Your passions don't have to be your master. Your past doesn't have to be your prison. You can be whole again. You can be the integer you were meant to be. Light will return to your eyes, and that understanding heart you once had can be restored bit by bit as you start the walk back home.
Here's the thing about wisdom. It's not a trophy you win once and keep on a shelf. It's a living thing that has to be fed every single day. Solomon's story ends on a note of vanity, a word that sounds like emptiness or vapor. He looked back on a life of unparalleled success and realized that without a whole heart, it all meant nothing. But your story hasn't ended yet. You are still in the middle of your chapters, and you have the power to change the ending starting right now. I want to give you a challenge for this week, something tangible, something that moves this from a video you watched into a life you are living. I call it the sanctuary audit. Sometime in the next 24 hours, I want you to find 20 minutes of absolute silence. No phone, no music, no distractions, just you and the divine. In that silence, I want you to ask one question. What is the one thing I'm holding on to that is keeping me from being whole? Don't go looking for a list of 10 things, just one. Is it a resentment? Is it a secret habit? Is it a high place you've built for your own ego? Once you identify it, I want you to make a physical gesture of letting it go. Maybe you write it down and burn the paper, or maybe you just open your hands in prayer and say, I am tired of carrying this altar. I'm tearing it down today. And then, and this is the most important part, fill that space immediately with a commitment to something eternal. Reach out to someone you love. Say a prayer of gratitude. Do something that aligns with the person you want to be in 10 years, not the person you feel like being right now. Because here is the beautiful, hidden truth that Solomon lost sight of. Our lives are not just about us. The choices you make to guard your wisdom and keep your heart pure are not just for your own peace. They ripple. They affect your children, your friends, and the people you haven't even met yet. There's a connection between us that spans across time, a love that crosses the veil of this life into the next. When you choose to be whole, you are healing the future. You are building a legacy that isn't made of gold or cedar, but of light and character, things that the moths cannot eat and the rust cannot touch. I know the world feels loud. I know the foreign gods of success, pleasure, and validation are screaming for your attention. But remember that still small voice that spoke to Solomon at the beginning. It's still speaking to you. It's telling you that you are enough, that you are loved, and that your heart is worth guarding. You don't have to be the wisest person in the room. You just have to be the most honest one. As we close this time together, I want you to take one last look at your heart.
It might be a little bruised, it might have a few fractures from the times you've drifted, but it is still beating. It is still capable of a mighty change. You are not a collection of your mistakes. You are a being of infinite worth with a divine destiny. Don't trade that destiny for a moment of distraction. Hold on to your wisdom. Guard your heart with everything you've got. And remember, you aren't walking this path alone. There is a power reaching out to you, ready to bridge the gap between who you are and who you were born to be. Walk into the light and don't look back. The kingdom you are building within yourself is the only one that will truly last forever. Peace be with you, and I'll see you on the path.